Hi, I'm Mike, and this is an intro. Alright, what we got here is a request deck by Evan F., the Zur the Enchanter Casual EDH. To be fair, the request itself was a Zur deck that wasn't going to focus on the really popular and really well-known combos that work with Zur. That basically is, you get out the cards that make him kill quickly, and then you defend him with all the counter spells. This deck is not going to go down that route. It's going to be casual, it's going to be fun. Honestly, it's closer to a budget deck than I was expecting. I wasn't building it that way, but it kind of turned out that way. So, hey, cool. But yeah, this is going to be an interesting take on Zur. Okay, for one, to start with, it's Zur, so it's still going to be kind of scary. But compared to his usual levels of hate-inspired that are completely justified, this is going to be the nicer variant. Nicer being incredibly relative. You all know Zur, the 4-drop, Esper Color General, 1/4 flying, and whenever he attacks, you take an enchantment from your library that's a converted mana cost 3 or less and put into play. Either on him, your opponent, onto the field, and yeah. It gets around Shroud too, not protection because that just is kind of screwy, but it does a lot of good stuff. So without ado, let's jump into it. First up, it's going to be the cards that support him. Not the really, really broken cards, but things that he's going to search up himself that are just fun to play. Again, casual format, this is going for entertainment more than anything else. First up, one of my favorite cards, Reconnaissance. It's a 1-drop enchantment that Zur can search up that says, remove target attacking creature you control from combat and untap it. If Zur can't survive combat, this fixes it. Because you want to attack with him, and really with a 1/4, unless you've buffed him for a Voltron style, you really don't need him to attack. You just need him to get through the attack phase for his ability. This makes sure that you don't ever lose him to combat, which is the easiest way to do it. Goodbye Death Touch or something with 4 attack. Next up, another solution, Phyrexian Reclamation. Pay 2 life, a colorless and a black, and return target creature card from your graveyard to your hand. I keep this in here because it's a black enchantment that's a 1-drop, so Zur can get it out quickly. If you have it in your hand, it's quick to get out. And if it's been a few times since Zur's been killed, it's really just cheaper to pay 2 to get him to your hand, and then pay 4 more to get him onto the field, rather than maybe 8 or 10 to, recast him. Now, again, casual, so that's a thing. If this was the more competitive variant, you wouldn't want to do this, but again, you have time with this deck. It's mostly for fun. Next up, Animate the Dead. This card actually is around just to make sure that if someone has something in the graveyard, you can steal it. It's any graveyard, and yeah, there's the -1 attack, but yeah, that doesn't really matter too much. This is just something that's fun to play. Zur can search it out, and it can change the game if you get something nice. There's a lot of targets, and everyone has their favorites. Personally, I would go for Bane of Progress just because it would screw over my opponents probably as much as me. But I would be the one who would benefit because I'd have that creature at the end. Alright, next up, Gravestorm. Yeah, I know. Most people would go with Necropotence, but again, casual. And if you drop Gravestorm, people are going to focus on you. Okay, not Gravestorm. If you drop Necropotence, people are going to focus on you because, okay, it's a scary card. It's a good card, but it's scary. Gravestorm is less scary. Not by much if you know what it does. At the beginning of your upkeep, target opponent may remove a card in his or her graveyard from the game. If that player doesn't, you may draw a card. If for some reason someone doesn't have a graveyard, all you really have to do is just choose them. Or if someone's using a graveyard strategy and they don't want to remove a card from their graveyard, choose them. You will draw a card. It's just a quick draw mechanic, or can get rid of someone's graveyard if they have scary things that you really don't want them to have. Alright, then, Unhallowed Pact. Can't get this thing to stay upright. Yeah. Another card to search out with Zur that makes it interesting what you do. You can basically steal a creature when it dies, as long as this is enchanting it. On the one hand, you can put it on Zur, so if he dies, he just bounces back. Or you can put it on to someone else who has an interesting sack ability, so if they ever use it, it's then yours, and you can use it. Or just someone who you really, really want to steal right before you kill them. It just opens a lot of interesting avenues that people don't usually think of when they play this card. Or at least you think of when you play it, other people don't when it's played on them. Then there's Nevermore. Okay, it's a dick move to play this in EDH. And it's not always effective. But if there's one thing that you know your opponent has, such as their general or a staple of the deck type that needs to come out for them to function, this will stop it. Or if you're playing someone who has an Iona deck, or a deck with Iona in it, and you just don't want to deal with that no matter what. This is a good removal card. Well, not even removal, it's more just, yeah, no, I'm not dealing with that. Similar to Prison Term. This is one of my favorite cards because, unlike the other ones that have these similar mechanics of can attack, can block, and no activated abilities, this one lets you switch target without doing any mana costs or recasting or any shenanigans. It just works when something enters the field. So if your first target, when you drop this with Zur, is the biggest threat, and then it suddenly isn't anymore, you can move this. Also, Vow of Malice. Because not only does it buff your opponent, or your creature, and gives them fear if you want, but it also makes it so you can't attack you or planeswalkers you control. So either Zur gets bigger, or a threat is going to get bigger who's no longer a threat to you. Which is also a similar reason for Propaganda and Ghostly Prison. They're a little slower than most people in competitive would play, because if someone has like Voltron style, they can probably pay the 2 or 4 and just swing at you. But again, it will always stop a Swarm deck, because most Swarm decks don't go infinite mana as well as infinite creatures. If they do, you're screwed, but at that point you're probably screwed regardless. This just gives you time to plan, time to work out what you need, and you can cheat them out with Zur. Steel of the Godhead. Yeah, it's just that good. Unblockable, lifelink, gives him a +2, 3-drop, can cheat him out with Zur, get him on there, saves him, hits harder, lets you drop in Daybreak Coronet, probably the most expensive card in this deck. It is why I wasn't originally considering this a moderate budget deck. Everything else turned out much better than I expected, with a couple exceptions. This thing gives you Vigilance, First Strike, and Lifelink, and +3/+3 for a 2-drop. So Zur can search it out. The only downside is you have to have this card previously enchanted. It's not a huge issue with Zur if you draw out the enchantments on him. But as the only thing, it just doesn't work. But for what it does, it can really lead up quickly to Spirit Mantle, which makes him pro creatures and gives him a buff, or Phyresis, which is just too good not to keep in here. Even if this is the only enchantment on Zur, it puts in all opponents on a 10-turn clock. Well, at least the one you're hitting. If you buff him, it makes it worse. Now these are the only things I'm putting in here that are specifically the Voltron style, because I want to diversify this deck for casual play. Well, that and Pentarch Ward. It covers Zur's ass, and it won't get rid of any things that are protecting him as well. Specifically, that last ability says, Enchanted creature has protection from the chosen color and doesn't remove Pentarch Ward. So if you're going against a mono-white deck, this doesn't remove itself, which is really good because that would be a very big play mistake if you had that. Alright, next up, we have the cards that aren't pieces of combo, but they're just quite useful. And they're not search cards either. New Prov Guildmage. His first ability, pay 2, target creature gains flying, isn't very useful because Zur flies. I guess if you're attacking with him it's useful, but meh. But his detain for 5. If you have infinite mana, you can detain everything. That's not too interesting. But detain on its own, on command, any turn without tap, that can stop a lot of threats from really screwing you over. And you're playing a Zur deck. People are going to try and screw you over because you probably deserve it. This is a casual variant, but anyone who doesn't know what Zur does will learn quickly. This guy will be useful as soon as they learn. Similar to Spellbook and Condemn. Spellbook because if you've drawn a lot of cards, you don't want to get rid of them, because cards in hand are so useful. And in the graveyard with this deck, they're less useful. And Condemn because it's the best way to get rid of an attacking general in most of EDH altogether. I'm sure they give life, but it doesn't really matter. Lightning Greaves because Zur, haste, win. And Knight of the White Orchid. Orchid. I think it's Orchid. I can never get that one straight. It's a 2-drop 2/2 with first strike. And if someone has more mana than you, this fixes it by 1 planes. It's mana ramp in white, so yeah, it's worthwhile to have in here, and it's an extra body that keeps her alive. Specifically by, keeping you alive by chumping something, probably. Or if for some reason you want to put the previous enchantments on him instead of Zur. He has first strike starting with, so why not? I wouldn't, but, to each their own. Next up, we have the cards that, let's see. These are the things that will enable Zur. Specifically, pull out combo pieces and cards you want to play. The first one is the card I wish more than anything was legendary. Sovereigns of Lost Alara. Okay, before I go on anything else, it's a 6-drop 4/5 Exalted. But specifically, when Exalted triggers, the creature that it's going on gets an aura from your library attached to it in play. That is so freaking scary. Now, add that to Zur, who's already getting auras out, and has 2 instances of getting something from your deck into play. You could really screw someone's day with that. You could probably pull off infinite combos with that if you reworked your deck to fit around it. This is casual, so I'm not going that route. But it's a Zur deck, so I'm still putting a lot of really dickish cards in there. Such as Merchant Scroll. Search your library for a blue instant card, reveal that card, and put it into your hand. It's a 2-drop sorcery, which can then search you up Mystical Tutor, which is the 1-drop instant search card that lets you search your library for an instant sorcery card, reveal that card, and then shuffle your library and put that card onto the top. So basically, the next time you draw, you're going to get what you want. Which is also good, but then there's things like Trinket Mage. Search for the artifact card with converted mana cost 1 or less, reveal it, and put it into your hand. Shuffle your library. And then after that, he's just a good blocker for chump. Reshape, which is basically the same thing as Tinker, except you have to pay X for that. It's X or less. So, on the one hand, Zur getting it out isn't possible. But it'll get out any artifacts you need for a combo or just for a good position. Fabricate doesn't put it onto the field, but it puts an artifact of your choice into your hand. You have to reveal it, but it's a blue search spell. What were you expecting? Limb Duel's Vault. A highly overrated, well, for Scry, it's overrated. For Search, though, it's underrated. It's a 2-drop instant speed search spell. Now, you're going to have to pay money into it, or, wow, I can't speak today. Life into this. But this is EDH. You start with 40. You have quite a bit to add. Basically, you look at the top 5 cards of your library. As many times as you choose, you may pay 1 life. Put those cards on the bottom of your library in any order, then look at the top 5 cards of your library. Then shuffle your library and put the last card you looked at this way on top of it in any order. The last 5. Does anyone else see where this is awesome? The average EDH deck is 100 cards, without the general, but just rounding. You have enough life off the top of the bat to find the card you need with this. Now, I wouldn't suggest doing that because that would really give your opponents an advantage. But you can probably go through maybe 10 life, and you'll probably find the card you need. Maybe less. Even looking through your top 10 alone would probably find something useful. So you'll find interesting things off it. And then there's the old standby, Diabolic Tutor. Find the card you want, put it into your hand. End of story. There's also the other tutors, but they're a little more expensive, so when I realized this was going to turn out to be much closer to a budget deck, I took them out. If you have them and you want to put them in, hey, more power to you. Alright, next up. Getting into the things that will probably earn you hate, but are also fun to play. There's a few combo pieces I wanted to jump into. The first being pretty standard. It's the Basalt Monolith combo. Basically infinite colorless mana. You either achieve that by getting this out with one of the search cards for artifacts and putting it into the field, hardcasting and just using it, and then dropping either Power Artifact with your general onto this, which is a really quick and effective ability for infinite color mana, or one of the other search for artifact cards, or search in general, for Rings of Brighthearth, which would also, enable the infinite colorless mana combo. Once you have that out, you have options. If you have them in hand already, there's always Gilded Lotus and Capsize. Gilded Lotus gives you infinite colorless mana. Well, you already have infinite, so you can just drop this pretty much. And Capsize, it then becomes basically a 2-drop, you always pay buyback, unless you just keep getting this for infinite colored mana. Then you can cast anything. If you don't have that in your hand, though, but you have a bunch of mana floating because things have been odd, there's always this combo. The Angel's Grace Ad Nauseam one. This one, you either have to get the right cards through search for it, because you can't search either of these out with Zur. But what it works is, you can't lose this turn. Split Second's awesome because they can't counter it either. And Ad Nauseam, you basically draw out your deck and drop your life well below 0. So you have to win this turn, but if you draw your deck, you should be able to win this turn. And Phyrexian Unlife is a 3-drop enchantment, so Zur can count. He can get it out. So as long as you have Ad Nauseam in your hand, because it's one of the search cards, you have the I can't win this turn, I have my hand as my deck. Reverse that, deck is my hand combo. Which will then give you the infinite mana combo if you have enough mana floating. You need a little, it's a little investment, but it works too this way. Now, once you have that out, you have a few options of how you want to do it. The one I think is the funniest, because I'm kind of an ass, works on the Guilty Conscience combo. Now, normally there would be a Stuffy Doll right here, but I figured that would be too much of an ass even for me. Okay, it's actually not too much of an ass move, but I would try to hold off on this one because I've done some other ones. Instead, I wanted to go Blinding Agony and the functional reprint, Spiteful Shadows. What they basically do is, Guilty Conscience says whenever an enchanted creature deals damage, Guilty Conscience deals that much damage to enchanted creature. Okay, decent. It means that basically, for most creatures, when they attack, they will then die. What this works, though, is with Spiteful Shadows and Binding Agony, again, all three of these cards can be searched out with Zur, so even if you don't have an infinite combo, this can work. Whenever an enchanted creature is dealt damage, it deals that much damage to its controller. This works whenever it deals damage. What you end up doing is an infinite loop that says this creature does damage to you, or did damage to one of your creatures, or to you. It then deals that much damage to itself. And with either of these enchantments out, it then does that much to its controller, which counts as damage, which it then deals to itself, which it then deals to its controller. Ends the game. Now, the problem with this is, with Stuffy Doll out, you make sure that they do damage. Without Stuffy Doll out, you either put it on someone who has to attack every turn, or onto the one guy who, if they don't attack, they are absolutely useless to the general strategy of your opponent, and they will lose because they can never risk it. That's a dick move, but it's fun. And, if nothing else, this will quickly stop someone, because they can't risk, instantly losing. And then there's the cards that take advantage of the infinite mana that you're going to use to win the game. Oddly enough, a few of them are just decent cards if you don't have infinite mana and you just want to have a decent board position. Such as Mindshrieker. 2-drop Flying Bird, Spirit Bird for 1/1. But its ability to pay 2, target creature puts the top card of his or her library into his or her graveyard. Mindshrieker gets +X/+X, where X is as card's converted mana cost. So not only is, with infinite mana, this is infinite mill, but just on its own, for 2, you can mill your opponent, make him bigger, and probably hit them for quite a good amount because EDH cards usually have a higher mana cost than other decks. So on its own, it could be a threat, a blocker, or just very utility. With some of the infinite combos out, it is an endgame because it will mill out everyone, and then selectively let you kill one player by just screwing them over with a huge hitting creature. Alright. White Sun Zenith. This one is a little more interesting, because it's only really useful to get infinite creatures if you decide to take away the problem that you are going to die due to life loss. With the infinite combos out, Phyrexian Unlife, that's not so much an issue. With the instant spell, you're going to lose next turn, so as soon as the game ends, or this turn ends, you die. With this, you take your, oh my god, so little life problem, and you give it to someone else. They instantly die, and you have life to attack next turn with an almost unbeatable army from White Sun Zenith. Or, you can jump into Crypt Rats. You can't die this turn, but everyone else can. So you pay X into Crypt Rats, and all players and all creatures take that much damage. End of game. And since you can't die, what do you care if you lose life? Then there's Mind's Aglow. If you have infinite mana, all you need to drop is 1 blue, and then you pay in, say 100 mana. Everyone draws out their deck and lose. You draw out your deck, and you wait a turn to lose, because you can't this turn. Everyone else loses first. Or, Shared Trauma. Everyone else mills their card for X, where X is how much you and everyone else pays into it. You're going to pay infinite. Or, well, probably 100 cards just for, what's... You can't lose the game this turn, and you win anyways because you won't be drawing. Everyone else, they go to their turn, and unless they win in the upkeep, possible but not likely, they lose. The thing about these cards, though, is they're all very useful without the infinite combo, and they're fun. Shared Trauma, for instance, just makes it so that, mill decks. There's a lot of people who will pay into it early on just because they want stuff in the graveyard. Mind's Aglow, early on, will probably give you at least 1 draw if you pay into it. And other people early on will pay into it because they want to draw cards, so it will enable you there. Crypt Rat, if nothing else, gives you time to deal with massive board positions, and really, you don't care about saving this guy if Zur isn't out. You don't have a lot of creatures, so mass destruction isn't going to hurt you. He's very good for just stalling the game in your favor. The same's true with Soul Conduit. If someone has a massive life total, steal it! White Sun Zenith could easily give you the cards you need to block until you have what you want. And like I mentioned, Mind Shrieker is a good blocker, and he's just very utility on his own. Sure, they also happen to win the game later on, but early on, they're very, very useful on their own. So yeah, that's my take on the casual Zur EDH, and thanks to Evan F. for suggesting it. It was fun to do.